Lemkin Solitaire and Equalizer seeders and planters offer disruptive innovation like vertical banding, dry and or liquid onboard fertilizer, and great prices. Go to lemkindemo.com for more information and to request a demo.
I'm Sean Haney, and this is Realag on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. Realag on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to Realag on the Weekend here on 650 CQM and 980 CJME. I'm your host, Sean Haney of RealAgriculture.com, and it is great to be with everybody here today. Hope you had yourselves a great week. Yeah, Mother Nature just keeps on sort of like teasing us with spring, snow on the ground in parts of the province. I hope you had yourselves a great week, and we're inching a little bit closer to being able to put some seed in the ground for sure. Some of you very, very deep into calving season. So just everybody stay safe out there and do your best. Okay, today on the program, we're going to be hearing from APAS, and their vice president, Chris Parasek, is going to be with us here today. Talk about some of the federal election priorities that the APAS would like to see discussed. We're also going to be joined by Carolyn Wilson and a paid-for product spotlight from Syngenta. And then David Chetnovic with CN Rail is going to be here as well to talk about some of the rail performance as of late. February was a tough month for the railways in terms of grain movement. David will be here to talk about that. If you have any feedback on today's program, we would love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also, of course, find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms, or you can always call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. If you're not getting our emails that come out every day, our free email updates, make sure you go to realagriculture.com/subscribe. Well, we had, Liberation Day, as President Trump called it this week, that took up a lot of oxygen in the room. And I'm not sure what you did for it. Probably not very much. I was stuck in front of the TV. And through a Canadian lens, I'd actually say that there's a lot of possible directions that President Trump could have gone. This was a real win for Canada. This is 2 weeks in a row where Canada can feel like it can actually breathe, and where it was another step closer to Fortress North America approach to trade. Well, what is Fortress North America? We'll get to that. There are still some grave concerns related to auto tariffs, steel and aluminum tariffs, other tariffs. Canada's still not out of the woods when it comes to the trade crosshairs with President Trump. Although its April 2nd announcement, however, seemed to signal that Mexico and Canada are different than the rest of the countries the U.S. is dealing with at this time. You know, Canada has felt serious heat since President Trump entered the White House for the second time, being treated similarly to nefarious trade actors like China and India. In the last 2 weeks, Canada has fallen back to the more comfortable position of not being an enemy, but maybe more of an ally in some respects. Now, I think it's also important that we recognize this is a serious gut check for Canadians at a time when the country has elbows up and anti-American sentiment is at a generational high. Again, the Trump announcement on Wednesday was a step towards Fortress North America, to borrow the term Doug Ford, Premier Ford, likes to use. But I'm not sure Canadians understand what is potentially in play. Fortress North America is a concept where Canada and Mexico are more entrenched with the United States than they have ever been. It involves deeply integrated supply chain, shared trade and security interests, regional self-reliance on critical commodities and goods, and mutually aligned trade protections versus economic foes. Whether it is regulatory alignment, stronger border enforcement, or parallel tariff strategies, Canada and Mexico are going to be pushed to think about North America over the European Union, Asia, or South America over the next 4 years, and possibly beyond. This may be the first time you've heard Fortress North America, but it's been around for a while. For many of you, tying Canada to a deeper U.S. relationship fresh off the 51st state threat seemed counterintuitive, but the numbers actually speak for themselves. Canada exports just under $600 billion a year to the U.S., while the European Union buys only $35 billion, China buys only $30 billion. It's not anywhere close in dollars. Canada's first economic priority is securing the strong economic ties to the United States. Put simply, Canada must choose China or the United States. It can't be both. I don't think it's going to be both. I've been talking about this scenario in many of my keynotes for a while. If Fortress North America is the reality, there are going to be some moments of adjustments and uncomfortableness for Canadians, specifically tied to more tariffs on China, not less. Sorry, canola growers. If you have any feedback on some of this, I would love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. We're back with more of Realag on the Weekend right after this. If you're serious about agriculture, Realag's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the Realag community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Lemken Solitaire and Equalizer seeders and planters offer disruptive innovation like vertical banding, dry and or liquid onboard fertilizer, and great prices. Go to lemkindemo.com for more information and to request a demo.
And welcome back here to Realag on the Weekend on 650 CQM and 980 CJME. Let's talk grain logistics. Who doesn't love chatting about that? Joining us right now is David Shednovic from CN Rail. David, it's great to chat with you again.
Good afternoon. Good to see you again.
Yeah, okay. So I looked at some of the railway performance numbers that the Ag Transport Coalition puts out. Wanted to have a chat with you and get the railways' perspective on how has this grain movement season been progressing. Some of the numbers look a little bit probably less than ideal. What you'd like to see?
Yeah, it goes without saying that for folks like you and me who are out on the prairies and lived through February 2025, it was a miserable February. If you take a look at the intensity of the cold we've had this winter, going back to starting a little early in November and then going to February 20th, the frequency of minus 25 or colder days that we've seen from Westman, so say Brandon out to Lloydminster, the frequency of that intense cold is somewhere between the winter of 3 years ago, 21-22, which was pretty bad, and 2013-14. And 2013-14, everybody still remembers that. So yeah, that kind of intensity of cold is hard on all aspects of the supply chain, including railway operations. February was really the toughest from February 2nd through the 19th. CN, as a matter of maintaining safe train operations and per Transport Canada regulations, when you hit ambient trackside temperatures of minus 25 or colder, you need to shorten train lengths to maintain those safe operations. And there was no let up in that period. Again, 3 weeks, we had a lot of minus 40 nights on the prairies, especially in Saskatchewan. That was really ground zero for it. And during that period of time, CN implemented its train length restrictions. We didn't have a let up in that stretch of winter, so it's not like you had a couple of bad nights and then it warms up so you can catch back up. So it was just day after day after day after day of that. And that most certainly impacted our operations and the operations of our customers. We saw grain elevator deliveries in that grain shipment week 27 to 29 period, which was the first 3 weeks of February, drop off by about 35% compared to where they were. Grain was still moving into the primary elevator system, but just like minus 40 is hard on locomotives and people, it's hard on getting trucks started and augers started.
Yep.
And we did see a drop in our performance in February. When we take a look at the grain plan, because I know there's a lot of references made about the grain plan and whether Canada's railways are performing per the grain plan, CN's guidance during winter, when we don't have Thunder Bay as an outlet available for grain movement, which takes a big bite out of the grain supply chain, but also remembering that winter's winter, and of course no two winters are alike, assuming that everything lines up in a given week, that's to say you have good operating conditions, no major mainline disruptions, no labor disruptions. Our guidance to the industry in front of this harvest was to move 595,000 metric tons of grain per week. In December, we moved 595 on average rate on the nose. In January, it was 602. February, we averaged 504,000 tons, and the low point for that was week 29 when it was the third of those 3 consecutive weeks. We've subsequently rebounded. We averaged about 636,000 tons in March and set a record by a whisker for grain movement in March, but our order fulfillment was not at all where we wanted it to be in the month of February, given how miserable that cold was and how it impacted all aspects of the supply chain, including CN's performance.
Okay, so just explain that. Record movement, but not meeting the order fulfillment is what, close that gap for us. What's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So when CN measures order fulfillment, we start the week and we take a look at what size of grain, what size of car program, that's to say the number of orders that we can accept based on what's going on in the supply chain in a given week. What size of program do we think we can deliver? So what happens is that we get all of the orders for CN supplied equipment on Tuesday. We have a sense on Tuesday of what's going on and what's happening in the supply chain that's going to either hinder or help overall movement of grain and other commodities. And by the time we get to Friday, we finalize our grain car order program based on what we think the supply chain can handle for that upcoming week. When the orders come in on Tuesday, there's no limit to the number of orders that come in. The demand is the demand, right? And you think about the fact that in February we weren't able to keep up with demand and that the weather was so miserable. So therefore, when the industry measures its car order fulfillment, the orders that were placed in the want week and whether those orders were supplied, there's no top end to the denominator. You know, it could be 7,000 cars. Like there's no way at that time of year you're going to get that type of order fulfillment. Thunder Bay's closed and the like.
Not correlated at all to what's possible. Like it's a detached number from the reality.
Yeah. It can be depending on how strong the demand for grain movement is. And when you get through for each week that's minus 35, minus 40, the overall situation compounds itself, and then you have pent up demand, so that you'd expect that number is going to be up there, right? And it also depends on what's going on in the market. But the capacity isn't infinite, and we understand that. Everybody understands that, but it's a simple measure. Here's the total number of car orders that were placed, regardless of whether the supply chain could handle them and were they fulfilled or not. When we measure, we say, okay, we're going to take the program that we finalized on the Friday, the orders that we were able to accept and plan based on what we knew at that time around what we thought the supply chain would handle, and what was our order fulfillment like. And we measure in two ways. One, for the orders that we accepted and planned, not against the roof of the orders, because there could be a difference versus what we received for orders and what we accepted and planned. For those orders that were accepted and planned, what percentage of them were supplied in the want week requested? And two, if they weren't supplied in the want week requested, were they supplied within 1 to 3 days of the end of the want week? So that's to say, okay, if I spotted them on a Monday versus a Sunday, okay, it wasn't supplied in the week requested, but I caught them up. Yeah. So in that period of time, thinking about, the month of February and March, our level of order fulfillment for the orders that were accepted and planned was around 70% for the want week requested. And that's not going to line up with the industry reporting for the reasons that we just talked about. And then for the orders that were either spotted in the week requested or within 1 to 3 days of the want week, the end of that week, it's in the 90s in terms of fulfillment. Look, don't get me wrong. The numbers are not where anybody wants them to be. We went through a miserable February. Did we want to achieve that kind of level of performance? No. Did our network recover quickly in terms of getting our network velocity back? That's to say the average number of miles that a car travels on a given day? Yes. From February 20th into early March, we recovered our velocity back to where we wanted it to be prior to when we had the February miserable weather. Have we sustained that? Have we sustained that velocity through the month of March? Yes. Did we have a big March? Yes. Do we still have a lot of demand to catch up on? Absolutely, because of the weather that we experienced in February. So I think that the level of demand is going to sustain here right through the month of April. Stocks in the primary elevator system around 4.7 million tons. There's a lot of grain that wants to get out of position there and get on rails. We're going to have road bans shortly, and we're going to see the the volume of deliveries drop off. But to make it really clear, all that considered, even with February being what it was, our grain volumes are still 11% ahead of last year's crop year to date, and we're on the second fastest pace on record, the fastest being the 2020-21 crop year. So, we have been able to move a hell of a lot of grain this year. We've most certainly had some bumps, and it's not been what we wanted, especially in the month of February. But we got back on the road here and had a big March, and we need to do that again in April to get caught up.
Yeah, appreciate those numbers. Gotta ask you, I think a lot of our audience is wondering how all the talk, some of the trade issues, all the talk about tariffs and how that is impacted. Obviously, we're talking about grain movement here, but the railway's moving a lot of autos and a lot of other stuff, and steel and aluminum as well. How are you working? What does it look like right now as you try to work through this?
Well, I guess it really depends on the day of the week, because as you and I would both agree, this has been a very volatile situation. I think the inference here is really think about the tariffs and the potential retaliatory tariffs going across the border to the United States. We also, of course, a couple of weeks ago had the announcement on the 100% canola meal and canola oil and pea tariffs that were implemented by China. That made for an interesting weekend in terms of trying to move the puzzle pieces around on the board. But what I can say is a couple of things. One, that some rail traffic segments more than others have tried to front load to anticipate what might happen. Might not happen, but not taking any chances. So that's had an impact on cross-border flows again for some commodities more than others. Two, we're staying as close as we can to customers to understand how those changes in flows are going to manifest themselves. For example, are we going to see more east-west flow here? And what does that look like? Or are we going to see the industry adjust, say, for example, in the case of the pace of canola crush? All those things are really important to anticipate and understand what the demand levels are, because it's all about corridor capacity. You got to understand the east flow, the west flow, north, south, and then thinking long term about how that may have impacts down the road here as we get into the summer and in a new crop. And that's going to be a whole other ball game. So we're trying to stay as close to it as we can, staying very close with our customers, and just keeping our eyeballs glued to the news to see any potential changes, because goodness knows there's been a lot of them.
Well, I know you're following Real Agriculture very closely for all those updates.
I am.
I know that. It's we got to wrap up here, but it's fascinating because you also have to think. You have to think ahead, project into the future in terms of what infrastructure is required, east, west, north, south. Like that, you just don't all of a sudden put in more track or more sidings tomorrow because of some sort of thing that changed in the news. That's the kind of real challenge I see for a business like yours.
It is long correct? Lead times.
Okay.
Two quick examples.
Yep.
You can't just take a bunch of locomotives off a shelf at Walmart and put them into your network. You have long lead times with respect to asset acquisition, maybe 12 to 18 months for locomotives. But from the time you get a person recruited, trained, and familiarized in the territory that they're going to be in, you're talking 9 months. Making big infrastructure investments, which includes environmental considerations and permitting, you're talking about years. So we do a lot of long-term planning. When there are wild shocks up and down, you're absolutely right, Sean. You cannot just turn on a dime and then flip a switch and think we're just going to boost a whole bunch more volume into a corridor, potentially that can't handle it. So as a nation, it's going to be really important. We focus a lot on corridor balance in our grain plan. You can't just shove it all into one particular corridor. To weather this storm, it's going to be important that all export corridors get utilized, including our eastern supply chain. That's going to be very important from a corridor balance perspective as we move forward.
Great stuff. David, really appreciate you joining us here today.
Very good. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
We've got more coming up here on Realag on the weekend. We'll be right back right after this.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Realag Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the Realag Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern, and don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. The following is a paid-for product spotlight by Syngenta. And we're joined right now by Syngenta's technical lead for fungicides, insecticides, and plant growth regulators. It is Carolyn Wilson. Carolyn, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks very much, Sean. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, so I just read your title there. Give us a breakdown. What's all encapsulated in that? What are you doing in your role at Syngenta?
Yeah, my role, I really have the privilege of providing technical guidance and kind of problem-solving solutions to farmers, across Canada, help them with disease, other pests, and overall plant health concerns in all kinds of crops, actually. So, with that, not only through my role in Syngenta, but I have a farming background and involved in various industry groups. I love plant pathology. It's really a passion of mine. And when I can bring that and find these practical solutions, to a customer, economic challenges, really excites me. So, and then today here, I'm really excited to help farmers talk about, understand enhanced plant health and in regards to fungicides and the science behind that and how it can be more productive crops for their farm.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest. You're right, like in a really great, exciting area of agronomy right now. There's a lot of interest in plant health and what are some of the things we can do to make that plant as healthy as possible, so to speak, so that, we're boosting yield. A happy plant, more output is really what our goal is. From your perspective, what do farmers, and this is a wide question, but what do farmers need to know about plant health?
Yeah, so, you nailed it there when we talk about plant health and bringing that, yield and better quality and just overall, production to a farmer. But we've used plant health as a general term for a long time. Lots of people have used it, but I don't think anyone's really brought the science behind what that means until now. And, we can say it's a really nice term to use, but what does it mean? So I'm here to talk about really, what Syngenta's extensive R&D has come up with for answers to those questions and how that, our fungicides are providing that healthier, greener, and higher quality yield as well to achieve this. With that, when we talk about using fungicides to protect from diseases, that's really the goal of using a fungicide. Our Syngenta Miravis brands, we are providing highest level of disease control to some of those really destructive diseases that we have. And, all of our crops, like, sclerotinia and canola, leaf disease, fusarium head blight in cereals, ascita, anthracnose, and pulses. And on top of that, they're also getting this benefit of plant health with our active ingredients. So back to that question about what is plant health and how do you describe it? When we relate that to a fungicide, it can really be described as a positive effect on the plant by using that fungicide in the absence of a disease. And not all fungicides have this plant health benefit. In Syngenta, and talked about that research, we really put those positive effects into three categories. Increased light energy capture is one of them. Increased chlorophyll leads to that greener plant. Improved water conservation is really important, and that's also one of those benefits that you're going to be seeing from our fungicides. And then, with that is enhance that harvest efficiency, quality, and yield. So really what it comes down to is optimizing plant development, and, especially during our short kind of Canadian growing seasons, we have adapalene and solatinol, keeping them healthier and allowing more time for that plant to fill grain and give you that yield potential.
Yeah, so let's hit on both of those, adapalene and solatinol. What do they do? How do they work?
Yeah, so those are our active ingredients that power our Miravis and Elatis fungicides. So we talked about, great disease control with using those, but the science behind how they work does go back to those three categories that I kind of mentioned. So that greening effect that you're going to see really is linked to increased chlorophyll and being able to capture more light into that plant. So it allows that plant to function more optimally for, development, and it makes them look greener and healthier. And then, adaptin and solatinol, really what it comes down to, it reduces plant transpiration rates or the loss of water out of that plant. But even though it does that, it maintains photosynthesis at a stable level. So what essentially that is conserving water, but continuing to develop even under water stress conditions. And as we know how important it is to maintain water, because that's directly related to yield potential. If we don't have that, we will have a shutdown of that plant or that growth. And with maintaining moisture, we're also optimizing nutrient use efficiency. So very important to our customers, obviously, and that's really where it comes down to the end result and at the end of the day. And there again, that higher yield, better quality, profitable harvest. So, that healthier crop also extends to healthier straw and stubble and, other benefits that come with those active ingredients.
Yeah, I like better profits. That sounds really good. I think a lot of the audience does as well. What kind of feedback are you getting on the suite of Miravis fungicides?
Yeah, so Miravis fungicides have been around for the last 5 years and launched in Canada 5 years ago. And we have a lot of reports, a lot of stories from the field really showing visually that Miravis is greener than an untreated or a competitor fungicide-treated crops. So we were regularly getting those questions like, why are they looking greener? Why do they look so good? And because it was very visual in the field, seeing those healthier plants. And, we are, have the data to respond to that it really is that adaptin and solatinol molecules in those fungicides. We can explain it with science and data. And like I said, the term's been used a lot, but we're the first company that's actually backing it with that science and data. So positive feedback from the farmers is that noticed plant health, the benefits, advancing that crop development, improved standability is another piece, and ultimately yields and crop quality. So for the most part, farmers reports, these positive return on investment from using the product. So even in low disease pressure situations, they're seeing really good return on investments by using our, solatinol and adaptin products. At the end of the day, that's the goal, putting the most money in their pocket as they can. That's their goal. And, it's also our goal at Syngenta as well.
Carolyn, if somebody wants more information about Miravis fungicides, where do they go?
Yeah, so I suggest you reach out to your local Syngenta rep in your geography, and also your local retail will have some information on this to help you out.
Great stuff. Thanks a lot for joining us here today on Real Ag Radio for this product spotlight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean. We've
got more coming up here on Real Ag on the weekend on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
For balanced nutrition with micronutrients, the best answer is Wolftrax DDP from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Wolftrax can ensure nutrient availability through a crop's growth cycle, visit wolftrax.ca.
As many of you know, there's a federal election underway, and there's a lot of issues that are being discussed. And you know what? There's always a list, a bunch of things that farmers wish would be brought up more in the national context, especially during a federal election campaign. Here to talk about some of the key election priorities from the position or through the lens of APAS, it is Chris Perosic joining us. He's the VP of APAS. Chris, how are we doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Sean.
Okay, so I want to hear, what are some of these key things that you think need to be talked about more?
But as you said, there's always a long list. I think probably the number one list with everything that's on the list is everything going on with tariffs and trade and whatnot, is we've seen a real spotlight put on some of the deficiencies in our infrastructure and our ability to execute trade, from railway service to port capabilities to just timeliness of the execution of it. And, last week we had a policy conference in Saskatoon, and Carlo Dade spoke about how we need faster execution. There's a spot in Peru that the Chinese have invested a significant amount of dollars that increasing Brazil's access to the market by 21 days. And here we are, we're at harvest. We've had labor disruptions. We've had poor rail service throughout the winter in parts of Saskatchewan and whatnot. That I think there needs to be some critical investment in infrastructure and trade.
Did Carlo give you his "we don't want shovel-ready" projects?
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
I've heard his rant before. It's not my first rodeo, and the whole idea there is just because something's shovel-ready, it doesn't mean it's strategic.
Right.
It may have just got through an approval process.
And some of these issues aren't new issues. Like, I'm sure you've talked about it at length, different points of whenever it bubbles up to the surface. But, like I said, with everything going on with tariffs, I think it's highlighted a need to diversify our trade. And in order to diversify our trade, that doesn't happen overnight. So in order to execute on that diversification, we need to be able to service it. And if we can't service it, no matter how diversified we become in our trade, we can't execute it, the customers are going to go away.
Yeah, for sure. What was something else that you think needs to be talked about more?
Anyway, I think another long-standing project APAS has been involved in is modernizing the Grain Commission services. We also heard from Marlene Borsch about export sales reporting. This is table stake stuff in the U.S. in terms of the USDA and whatnot. We need that capability for farmers in Canada to have those numbers to make sound marketing decisions. A few other parts that tie into it would be modernizing grain contracts in terms of adding a bit more protection in for producers for delivery times, delivery months, buyout penalties, those types of things. And probably the biggest one that's hit this last year was producer payment protections. And we're in 2025 and there's producers still not getting paid for delivering grain to elevators. So those would be the next wave of, if we can answer those. Further to that, probably business risk management programs. We've seen some chatter about it before the writ dropped. And it would be interesting to see how each party kind of positions the business risk management portfolio in front of the electorate.
Well, I'm going to wish you luck on getting the second items there ever talked about in terms of a federal election campaign. Now, trade and infrastructure, I think that's top of mind for a lot of Canadians. And, in agriculture and in energy and forestry, we're talking about infrastructure around trade and just trade period all the time.
Yep. And
it's interesting how all of a sudden a lot of Canadians have woken up to the fact that this is kind of an important thing. And I think there's more that need to wake up because I actually don't think a lot of Canadians understand how important trade is to our economy.
Yeah, it's one of those things that a lot of people don't pay attention to it till they feel the hurt, I guess, in some ways is what we've seen in the last probably 3 months. So, trade is critical, especially as, Saskatchewan, we're the center of Canada. Everything comes in or out. Like there's a lot of things that are crucial that we need infrastructure for. And, probably they're too big of projects for, say, a provincial authority to take on. So that's where you need the federal support. And it's part of a bigger strategy in terms of how you get goods to market and back into the interior of the country.
Yeah. We're gonna hear a lot about a lot of things during this campaign. It seems to be, though, all focus is currently on how to deal with, how to respond to, how to get to the other side of it, all around U.S. President Trump. And for a lot of farmers, we look at some of the trade numbers. No matter what you think about the politics south of the border, it does not take away the fact that Canadian agriculture, Saskatchewan agriculture, very reliant and very U.S. trade is very important to the sector.
100%. I think even Saskatchewan is positioned with some of the issues that's happened in terms of trade with China, with India before that. Like trade is a significant part of our agriculture portfolio, but just our manufacturing portfolio within Saskatchewan. It's trade is what we need to have executed well.
Yeah.
And I think too, and this applies across all rural Canada, is that you and I both know that when ag does well, the communities do well. There's cities like Lethbridge, Weyburn, Yorkton, that when ag's doing well, that farmers are investing in their business, whether it's buying equipment or inputs or services. I think that's the theme of what we're trying to position is unleash the potential of ag. I think turn ag loose and let's let ag be a major driver of the economy going forward.
Yeah, that is very well put. I think you've it works its way through the rural economy, and we talk all the time about how we need to have thriving rural economies, and you put that well. Hey, you mentioned trade, China, very important.
Yep.
But we have a bit of an issue with them when it comes to some of the ag commodities, canola meal and oil. Two examples, pork another one, as well as some of the aquaculture. Well, field peas is another as well. Is APAS one of the groups that's calling for financial assistance to farmers for this, or what's been APAS's position on it?
It's a good question. I think we've been in the position we need the government to sort out trade, and not have ag be part of some of the collateral damage of trade other places. I think the challenge is how do you quantify some of it, because the markets are back up. Yeah. This is not a new thing for China. And I think our position has been that we shouldn't have to borrow our way out of some of these trade disputes. Because I think there's a lot of money announced through FCC, and those are all great. But when we're looking at the wrong side of the margin tower in terms of our farm economics, borrowing to get out of it shouldn't necessarily be the way. That's where I think we'd be today.
Yeah, and the hard reality probably is, and I'm kind of speculating here, but China will lift those tariffs when they need canola meal and oil, or that's
right.
Also how China operates.
That's exactly how they've operated for quite a long time. And I was hearing before that China was kind of getting not sour on our yellow peas, but there is a freight advantage from countries closer to China to get peas there anyway. So it's a bit of a way to lower the price, jump in, buy some seed to crush themselves, and then they save themselves how many thousands or how many millions of dollars in terms of cost, right? It's not a new or unsurprising tactic from China.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Chris, really appreciate you joining us here. All the best to you in the 2025 growing season. I'm sure we will talk to you as the year progresses.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
If you have any questions, thoughts, theories, conspiracies, takes, whatever it is, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us here today for Real Ag on the Weekend on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME. Have yourselves a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week. Cheers, everybody.